George, this is the first interview we have done in approximately 2 years. Before we talk about your 1 Million Trees campaign, can you give us an update on how your group, the Gorta group, and Self Help Africa are getting on in general over the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, it's I guess like everything has been going kind of very well for the last few years. We've had year-on-year growth, and then we have this very significant challenge ahead of us this year, like every other charity, as a result of the lockdown and the COVID-19 crisis generally. It has inevitably hit our kind of fundraising activities. It's affected programs in Africa, but we're in the boat with pretty much everybody else in the country. Nobody is really escaping the economic fallout of the situation that we're in, Darren. So in that regard, we would have had quite a few kind of large-scale events planned for this year in the US, in the UK, and in Ireland. And all of those have, well, currently anyway, they're cancelled. So that has had an impact on fundraising and activities like people taking part in sponsored walks on the Camino or running in the Ethiopian Marathon. All of those things running indeed in the New York Marathon. Those activities have all taken a hit, so to speak.
And how has the coronavirus impacted on the people that you work with, like the smallholder farmers and all that?
Well, that's a question we've been asked sort of quite a bit, and the situation at the moment, as of only 2 or 3 days ago, on the continent of Africa, they had recorded 100,000 cases of coronavirus. Now, when you consider that we've had kind of 25 or 30,000 in Ireland, that's very low. Now, it's like all of the material that we're reading and what we're hearing is there's no room for complacency. If it does land on the continent or in different countries in Africa in the way that it has in parts of Europe or in America, there could be a serious difficulty because kind of health services are very weak. Like there are 10 countries of the 53 or 54 in Africa, 10 countries have no ventilators. So we're hearing about, and intensive care services would be quite poor. Now, while there have been just over 100,000 cases recorded, testing is very light as well. Like the equipment for, to test people for coronavirus is light. If you were going to ask me why has it not affected Africa like elsewhere, I think part of that is the fact that the societies and the communities with whom we're working, and most of Africa wouldn't be half as mobile as we are here. Like people aren't jumping onto Lewis's and darts and trains and undergrounds and planes with the same frequency. If people live in rural, poor, remote communities, they tend to kind of stay largely within that community. That's where they work. That's where they live. That's where they go to school. So the concern about the spread of the virus is more focused on built up urban areas because the potential for spread is greater. But the other part of the equation, and it is a part that we're watching very closely, and is there is an economic cost of coronavirus in Africa because a lot of countries closed down early, and a lot of people don't have money in the bank and don't have reserves, and there aren't kind of social welfare supports, and if you can't work, you don't get your days, you don't get the money that provides for your family tomorrow. So that has been a challenge, and people are feeling the kind of economic pinch of the control measures that in some cases have been, in a lot of cases, have been put in place by governments in countries like Uganda and Kenya, where people have been told to stay at home, and that has had an impact on the ability of kind of people to support themselves.
I interviewed Paul O'Brien, the CEO of Plan Ireland, there a few weeks ago, talking about Africa, and the coronavirus. I've done a few interviews on the coronavirus. Just one more question before we move on to your campaign. Are any of the people you work with victims of the whole locust attack of the locusts?
The locust situation. That first arrived in the Horn of Africa in last December, and it has spread to Kenya, and there has been quite a lot of destruction to crops. There was one report, not in a project area where we were working, but in a day, a swarm of locusts had kind of consumed the equivalent amount of food as 35,000 people. So, like, you're talking vast swarms of desert locusts. They're currently incubating, and there is a concern that there could be, or we're on the cusp of a second wave of locust breeding.
Okay. Yeah, I might come back and talk to you again about that story. It's unbelievable.
Sure.
Okay, to move on to talk about your campaign, and I heard your CEO, Ray Jordan, talking on the Pat Kenny show recently about it on News Talk. It's a fantastic campaign, I believe. Can you fill our listeners in on what is going on with the campaign?
Sure. Yeah, it's called, first of all, it's called 1 Million Trees. And the idea, basically, in the 35, 40 years of our organization, Darren, we have always planted trees. They're part of the mix of activities that take place on small scale farms. Trees are a source of food, like whether it's nuts, cashew nuts, or macadamia nuts, or whether it's papaya or mango or etc., etc. So they're either, they can be a source of food, they can be shade, they can be shelter, they can restore degraded land, and do much more. So we have always in our projects planted trees to provide, like in the current era, before we were talking about COVID-19. The concern that an awful lot of people had was the changing climate and what that was doing to the world, and the impact of climate change and the impact it was having. So we looked at, we considered some, various strategies, and we thought that, well, why not set ourselves a target of planting 1 million extra trees, additional trees to the ones that are being planted in our programs during 2020, and to make it engaging and interesting to people at home here in Ireland, to link up with the local partner and plant 100,000 new native trees in Ireland and 1 million in Africa. Now, we spoke to Glenisk, who are the yogurt makers, and they for their own reasons, and they're interested in sustainability and reducing their own carbon footprint. So they got on board, and on pots of Glenisk bio yogurt, people will see this campaign for 1 million trees. It's actually 1 million trees in Africa and 100,000 in Ireland. And the way people can support, for every €5 that's donated to us at selfhelpafrica.org, we will plant 10 trees for the donor in Africa and 1 native tree here in Ireland through our local partner, who are a local NGO called Trees on the Land. They work north and south of the border. Now, also for the coming 3 weeks, the Super Value stores all around the country, there's over 220 of them. If you buy a 1 million trees branded large pot of yogurt in a Super Value store, Super Value and Glenisk will donate €1 of the cost of that yogurt to this campaign to plant trees on behalf of the people that buy the pots of yogurt. There's another aspect to it that may be of interest to people. For every donation that we receive, for every €5 that we receive, we are GPS tracking the location in Africa where the trees are being planted, and we'll send people a GPS location, and if they want to go onto Google Earth or Google Maps, they'll be able to see where their trees are being planted, or indeed they can look back in 10 years' time and see how the trees are getting on.
That's cool, yeah. And what kinds of trees will you be planting?
Well, I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of fruit trees in the mix. So that's everything from macadamia nuts to cashew nuts to fruit trees to mango, papaya, orange, lemon, things like that. But also, there are trees to restore the landscape. There's various types of acacia trees that are deep rooted, and so they prevent soil erosion and they fix nitrogen into the soil. And a whole host of trees, depending on the circumstance and the location. But one other point just to make to you, trees that are being planted by us with local community groups, with local government ministries, and with local households. And the trees will all be carefully managed, and they are a source of livelihood for the people in the communities where they're being planted. So there's no big quilcha across the side of 10 mountains, like sort of hundreds of thousands of trees or anything like that. It's all very strategic planting within programs and areas where we're working.
Okay, is the target of 1 million trees, George, being planted dependent on how much money is raised towards the campaign, or will 1 million trees be planted irrespective of how much money is raised?
Well, we have made a commitment that we will plant 1 million trees. So the 1 million trees will be planted irrespective of how we get on with the campaign. But I'm happy to report the campaign has been doing kind of very well, and the response, there's donations coming in every day. So we're very heartened by the response from the public. We have the support of the GPA, the Gaelic Players Association. They're going to be doing some activities, and the INTO, the Irish National School Teachers Association. Now, none of us really know at the moment what's going to happen in the autumn, but the plan is that in thousands of schools around the country, we'll be sort of getting involved in campaign activities in schools, like both educational resources for kids and encouraging kids and children in the classroom and teachers and parents to support the campaign as well. Now, the one proviso I'll just put on that is the campaign we will reach the 1 million trees, but it may be sometime into early 2021 before we hit those targets. Certainly in Ireland, a lot of the trees that are being planted here will be planted in the spring of next year, because there's certain windows for planting trees, and one of them is, you might know this, but apparently in Ireland you plant a tree in any month that has an R in it. So January, February, March, and into April. But April is a bit late, and then you don't during the summer when the trees are in bud or in bloom or have leaves on them, and then again in the autumn. But there obviously, for various reasons, for reasons of COVID-19, there were no trees planted in March or April, and we don't know what the situation is going to be in September, October. So it may be into the spring before we can plant in Ireland, and certainly, it will be working into the spring of 2021 that we'll also be planting in the countries in Africa.
Okay, where are they going to be planted, George, in Ireland and Africa?
We're working with a local partner called Trees on the Land, who are identifying sites. Now, their program for 2020 has been inevitably affected by the COVID-19 close down, but they are identifying sites around the country, and amongst those, interestingly, will be 120 acres of land that are on a farm that's owned by the Cleary family, who are the owners of Glenisk yogurt. They are reforesting with native Irish trees 120 acres that apparently some generations ago had been forestry. It was all cleared for agriculture, and they're going to reforest 120 acres, or that's their plan. That's part of their commitment to the campaign. But with Trees on the Land, we'll work on various sites. But I know from speaking to them that they work with sports clubs, they work with golf clubs, they work with schools, they work with community groups, they work with tidy towns associations, and they identify sites all around the country and work with those groups. And what we'll be doing is the donation to Trees in Ireland will be provided to them and provided to the tidy towns and other groups.
That's cool, fair play to you. Okay, George, come towards the end of the interview. Is there any other information you want to get across to our listeners about the campaign and about your work in general before we finish up?
Well, yeah, no, listen, thank you for the opportunity again, Darren. But yeah, I guess the main thing is just for the coming 3 weeks, if people want to support the 1 Million Trees campaign, one of the main messages is none of us are going to fix climate change alone, but we all can do something. And one of the really simple things that people can do is a donation of just €5 will plant 11 trees in your name, or €10, that's 22, etc., etc. So if people want to donate, or indeed if they're just going down to their local SuperValu and they see a pot of Glenisk yogurt with 1 million trees on it for the coming 3 weeks, they know that €1 of that purchase price will go to plant trees.